Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University, another Saturday live study. We are continuing in this lesson in Module 1. Last week we went over the pecs. Remember, we're working on the muscle groups right now in this particular lesson, and today we're going to be going over the shoulders or the deltoids. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you everyone for coming on board. Remember, at the end, if you got questions, you can go ahead and just kind of throw them out and we will take care of it at that time. So I'm going to go ahead and get this up, and give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Thumbs up. Yes. All right. Great. So folks, we've gone through, generally the way we do this is we explain it and we train people in the same way that I'm going through each of these muscle groups, which is larger in generally larger muscle groups to smaller muscle groups, again, depending on the type of programming that you're going to establish for your clients, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Some people like to do two full body workouts in a week. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, depending on the intensity of the training. Generally, at 3 days a week, we're going to do a push-pull system where we train the upper body pushing muscles and the upper body pulling muscles on 2 separate days. And then the third day is going to be legs. That's generally how we work it. You can do a 2-day week where you do just legs one day and just upper body. But that's why we are going through it in this scenario. So generally, if we talk about the shoulders, but keep in mind that most workouts that we're going to do in the upper body is going to involve the pecs, the shoulders, and the triceps. So just keep in mind, as we're talking about deltoids, a lot of the exercises, a lot of what we're doing here is going to already be trained when you do your pecs. Everybody got that? So when I'm training my pecs and I'm doing pressing movements, I'm getting a substantial amount of anterior deltoid activity. Anytime I train my back and do any pulling movements, for sure, my posterior deltoid is getting a lot of activation. But make it real simple. Let's talk about the kinesiology of the deltoids. It's a single muscle. By the way, just keep in mind, we talk about the 3 heads. Everybody knows we've got one muscle with 3 distinct components, or what we call heads of the muscle. So the deltoid tendon, all 3 of the heads originate in this upper part of your shoulder area up here on the up top part of the shoulder blade, and a couple of different attachment points along what's called the spinous process of the shoulder blade, or the superior spinous process. And then that muscle shaped like a triangle, that's why it's called deltoid, right? A delta. The muscle fibers are generally intermixed, lots of tendon attachments, but ultimately all 3 of those heads, all of their tendons ultimately attach into the outer aspect of the humerus, right? The upper arm bone. Hope everybody understands that. So normally when we're training people's delts, and it's a good thing to keep in mind when you're training somebody and you're asking them where they feel it, where should they feel it? Most people will go like this. They'll tap the upper part right up in here, right? Well, that's not your deltoid. Your deltoid is where? It's on the outer part of your arm. So the deltoid really, the actual muscle belly itself is really more strategically located on the outside, all the way down, almost not to the middle of the humerus, but that upper third of the actual humeral bone. So that insertion point comes sort of way down here. You can actually, and again, you can see this on folks that are really lean. You can see where that insertion is, and it's generally way down here. So when I ask people if they feel it in their delts, I'm tapping them on the side of their arm, not on the top. Remember, if people are doing these exercises, they're training deltoids, and they feel it up here, what muscle is up here? The trapezius. We ain't training the trapezius, right? We talked about the trapezius when we trained back. So everybody got that? 3 heads to the deltoid. No, the answer to the question, and I know you're asking, is no, you do not have to train all three heads individually. Uh, 99.9% of all my clients, I mean, I have trained athletes, of course, but the majority of training clients are not competitors. They're not going to compete, so they don't care if their shoulders are balanced between the anterior and posterior head. If you want to have some fun with folks and do sides and fronts and rear laterals, sure, but it's not necessary. You're going to see that just two, maybe three of these exercises themselves will provide all the stimulation to all three heads of the deltoid. If you're training somebody that's trying to obviously compete, and that would be bodybuilders, obviously, or fitness competitors, then you could do more targeted, specific work for the different heads. Okay, hope that makes sense. So, again, anterior, medial, posterior heads of the deltoid. You cannot train one without having the other two involved. Okay. Classic example is if I do front lateral raises. How many of y'all have done front lateral raises? Right? You take your dumbbells and you lift them out, right? And you're doing this. And you're emphasizing that anterior delt. Absolutely. You're absolutely putting more stress on the anterior head. But believe it or not, the posterior head is also working. It's actually acting more as a stabilizer as you lift the arm up to the front. So even the posterior head of the deltoid does get worked a little bit when you do anterior deltoid work. I hope that makes sense to everybody. These are not three separate muscles. They are one muscle with three unique um, uh, nerve attachments and multiple nerve attachments into those heads. So you can train one and put more emphasis on it and de-emphasize the other two, but you will never not train all three heads. I hope that I almost confused myself with that. You guys are good, right? Okay. So, and by the way, the same, now go to the other side of this. You know how you lean forward and you do rear lateral raises, right? For the rear head of your deltoid. Yes. Have you done those? Right? Well, when you do a rear lateral raise, right, to train specifically the rear delt, yes, you are putting more emphasis on the posterior head, but the anterior head is still contracted. It still actually gets some neurological impulse and stimulus. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So, what are the kinesiological functions of the deltoid? The main thing we say is shoulder abduction. Please remember abduction versus adduction, right? Abduction and adduction are kinesiological terms we use to describe movement in the frontal plane, right? Everybody remember sagittal, frontal, transverse planes? Give me a one of these if you remember what we're talking about, okay? So these movements, shoulder abduction is movement away from the midline of the body, and that occurs in the frontal plane. It's really helpful to know these things, okay? So abduction away from the midline, adduction towards. Add the arm back down to the body. So the deltoids are responsible for shoulder abduction. Now, just to make things interesting, both the anterior head and the posterior head of your deltoids also have additional sort of jobs when it comes to the different movements that we do. And what we know is that when you do internal rotation of the humerus, okay, your anterior deltoid actually assists with internal rotation. Y'all got that? Is it a huge part of it? No, but it is a fairly active muscle that works with the pectoralis major and the latissimus dorsi to internally rotate. So the anterior component, that front part of your deltoid, that head, actually assists when we're doing internal rotation. And what we also know is that the posterior head helps and assists with external rotation. Now, keep in mind, external rotation, predominantly two muscles in the shoulder. Okay. SITS, right? Your sits muscle, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. You can switch those S's around. But the infraspinatus and the teres minor, the shoulder rotator muscles, are the two external rotators. Well, again, when we discuss external rotation at the shoulder, we just talk about those two guys mainly. However, to be complete in our explanation, we do have to add the posterior deltoid as a sort of a helper in that external rotation. Is everybody with me on this? So remember, the deltoids, shoulder abduction, how far up do you have to go to stimulate the deltoid maximally? Roughly 60 degrees of abduction is all that is necessary. However, when you lift up and further beyond that, you are now going to engage the trapezius. Now, nothing necessarily wrong with going up a little bit higher than 60 degrees. I'm going to come off here because that basically explains it, right? Abduction, you lift your shoulders out to the side. You can do anterior deltoids, you can do rear deltoids to put more emphasis on either the anterior or posterior delts. So let's talk a little bit about the actual exercises and how to do them correctly. Now, remember, if you're holding a dumbbell at your side, so everybody, you're holding 10-pound dumbbells. Steve, you're holding 20s. Junior, you're holding 30s. Okay, Naveen, you can hold 15s, and Bean, I'll let you hold 10s or 15s, okay? So you guys are holding those dumbbells, and you're going to lift out to the side, right? How much tension is developed on the deltoid when you're just holding the dumbbells? Okay, you can come off mute, Steve. Come off mute and tell me how much tension is on your deltoid muscle when you're holding the dumbbells right down at your side before you start the exercise. How much?
There's little or no tension because
Little to none, right?
yeah,
What now? Stay with me. Stay off mute. What happened? Watch my arm. Watch my arm. How about when I lift it out to here? How about then? How much tension?
yeah, there's gonna be
A little bit,
40,
right?
30%,
What
20,
happens
30.
when I get what happens when I get to here? What starts to happen?
It's gonna increase. Tension
You
increases.
start to feel a little bit of tension.
Yeah,
Remember, we
yeah,
we we already talked about this when we discussed torque, right?
yeah,
The moment arm. What happens when I get out to here?
yeah. It's gonna be tougher. Yeah,
You're going to be feeling, and that's about 60 degrees of abduction, right about there.
yeah, yeah,
We don't stop there generally. We will normally go up to parallel,
yeah.
right? It doesn't, it's not that big of a deal. But when I get up to parallel, I have hit maximal tension, or at least
Tension.
that's what I'm going to feel on my deltoid. You with me? Is everybody with me?
Yeah,
Now, if I go up to, let's just say this is where I stop. I could go up a little higher. I just don't want people to feel it too much in their traps when they're doing it. But sometimes I'll have people go up even higher if they don't feel it too much in their traps and they really feel their deltoid under a very heavy contraction, really strong contraction. I'll have them go higher. Once again, as long as they don't feel it in their neck, that's the tipping point. It's one of the reasons why I normally go to here, and I can always see when they're going to feel it in their traps. Because guess what's going to happen? Watch this. They're going to do this. Can everybody see how I elevated my
yeah.
scapula, my shoulders, how I lifted my shoulders up? That's generally what you're going to see. You want to minimize or eliminate that as best you can when you're doing lateral raises, just as a for instance. So, getting back to the point of when I lift all the way out to the side at roughly parallel to the ground, about 90 degrees of abduction, I've got maximal tension because torque is maximized.
Yeah.
What happens if I do lift up here? How much tension is still on my deltoid?
There's tension, but it's less than 45.
It's
It's
going
less than
down a little
B90.
bit,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
man, I tell you what, it's still pretty intense, isn't it?
yeah,
Absolutely. So that's why it's a balance, folks. It's a balance. When we train people, you might come up to here with some folks, you might come up to here with some folks, because some folks might be able to keep their shoulder girdle down and lift up a little higher. Now, we haven't even talked about the positioning of the wrist, anything like that. It's not that big of a deal. You just got to be very careful when you're doing these exercises that you are always getting the feedback necessary to let you know whether or not their hands are positioned correctly, arms are forward or back. Does that make sense? So when I'm doing this with somebody, they're only going to feel it in like one of two places. Where are you generally going to feel like a lateral raise when you're doing the exercise. You're either going to feel it out here in the deltoid and or up in the neck area, the trapezius. And some people literally feel it like all through the back of their neck up in here because the trapezius goes all the way up here, guys. Just remember that. Okay. All the way up and back there. So people, when they contract their trapezius, it's not just here. They'll feel it all the way up, right? Literally up almost to the to C1, C2 in that up in that area. So how do I know? How do I know if I'm doing it correctly with somebody? Is I simply poke on their deltoids and I go, do you feel it here? Yes. Perfect. Do you feel it here? No, I don't feel it there. Well, where do you feel it? Up here? And they go, yeah. Yeah. And I go, okay. Okay, here's what I need you to do. The standard kind of workaround for that scenario is having them move their arms, which are out to the side, have them move it in front of their body a little bit. Watch this. From here to here
Yeah.
to there. Did you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
When I look at them from the side, their arms should come in front of the body a little bit. And you bend the elbows. Now remember, guys, you got to do this with the client. Every client's going to be different. Yes. Okay. So lateral raises, you saw that. Lateral raises, great exercise to quote isolate the deltoid. What's another really good exercise we can use for shoulders? It's sort of a meat and potato exercise. Presses, shoulder presses. Yes. Dumbbells, barbell. My preference is to use dumbbells. Why? Because I can change the position of my wrist to move the elbows in or further out when I do the exercise. Are you with me? If I have a bar, great way to do them, but sometimes some people have a challenge manipulating the bar. And by the way, don't do your presses behind the neck. Always do shoulder presses to the front, leaning back slightly if possible. In fact, what I do, and I've always trained people like this, is on the flat benches that are like this, I try to get them back about 20 to 30 degrees if the bench is able to do that. I'll lean people back slightly so they're back this way versus like this. You get it? Why?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a reason why should you do it at the back?
Yeah, you don't do anything to the back. Why? Because when you are you have to externally rotate. So when you externally rotate the shoulder, you already put it into an unfavorable biomechanical position. There's nothing wrong with externally rotating.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you combine external rotation with shoulder movements this way, adduction, abduction. Remember, even though I'm bending my elbow, if you look at my arm, it's closer to the midline of my body. Look at my elbow. Don't look at the hands, guys. Don't look at my hands. Look at my elbow. Everybody look at my elbow.
Yeah.
Is it closer to the body or further away from the body? It goes closer to the body. That's adduction. Now watch. Don't look at my hand. Look at the elbow. What just happened? What movement is that? What's that called?
Away from the body.
And what's that called?
That's adduction.
Abduction. What you're doing, what most people do, and it gets confusing. Don't get me wrong. I understand it's a little confusing. You're sitting there going, but you're pushing your hands. And don't look at the hands. You look at just the position of the arm. And the way you can see the arm best is by looking at the elbow. If I go like this, my elbow is moving away from the body, isn't it? Hey, Sheila.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bina, Naveen, yes, you got this. Okay. So when we combine shoulder abduction or adduction in an externally rotated position, because of the structure of the humeral head sitting in the glenoid fossa of the scapula, because of the way that head is shaped, the head of the humerus is shaped, and the fact that you got the acromion process right on top, it can be biomechanically unfavorable. It could cause some inflammatory response if you do it over and over and over. If some people have done this, I used to do it all the time. I ended up getting a shoulder injury. I'm not sure that's why it was, but it didn't help. So what we do is we say, let's just be super careful. And by the way, it doesn't matter from a muscular development standpoint whether you do to the back or to the front, does it? No, it's negligible difference. But if I do to the front, I don't have to externally rotate. I mean, do it yourself. If you have a bar to get it behind your head, what do you have to do? You have to externally rotate more. Got it? Now, if I lean back and I imagine that I bring the bar in front of me, right down to my chin, can everybody see the difference? I'm externally rotated like this behind the head. Does everybody
Yeah.
see that?
Mm-hmm.
Versus, watch. Now, watch this. I'm more internally rotated this way. Does everybody see the difference? External rotation, internal rotation. More biomechanically favorable. And when I do it to the front, I can also manipulate the position of my hands on the bar. Some people do much better with the bar, with their hands a little closer when they press from here to here. Other people do better if their hands are further this way when they do it from here to here. Does everybody see the difference? I don't know what's going to be best for you, Steve. The way you do it might be very different than the way Bina does it. Bina does it like this, and she goes, man, that really hurts my shoulder. You do it, and you're like, man, I really feel that in my shoulders a lot. So I've got to now have Bina do it this way. And she goes, oh, yeah, that doesn't hurt anymore. Because everybody's different biomechanically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Once again, you have lots of options. You can do upright. I don't normally like to do upright rows. I do have the exercise listed there, but you have to do upright rows correctly. And in order to do upright rows, how many of y'all have done them? Upright rows, these guys, right? You ever do those?
Yeah.
That was like a meat and potato. I used to do that all the time, as heavyweight as I could. Well, unfortunately, what you're doing when you lift up,
I think it
you are
works on the
now,
deltoid more.
you're internally rotating the deltoid or the shoulder, not the deltoid. You're internally rotating the shoulder joint. Once again, guys, this is all about biomechanics. And it's all about the shape of the head of the humerus inside its little cup called the glenoid. That's a part of the scapula, right? That's the outer part of the scapula that contains that little cup where the head of the humerus sits into. And anytime you internally or externally rotate the humerus, these are not perfect balls inside. You get what I'm saying? These are odd shaped structures, perfectly designed to do certain things and not well designed to do other things. And when you take a weight and put your hands close together and you start to lift this way, try to lift your elbows up as you get closer and closer. And guess what happens? You see what happened to my shoulders? Why? Because I cannot, listen to the word, I cannot effectively abduct the shoulder in this internally rotated position. Does that make sense to everybody? Remember, if my arm goes down, my elbows come closer to the body. And as I lift, imagine I'm holding a bar and I have my hands real close together. And when I lift up like this, look at my elbows. How far can my elbows go? If I try to lift higher and higher, I got to do this. Well, you already know that's not an effective way to train the deltoids. So you can do upright rows correctly. What would I have to do? Somebody tell me. Somebody tell me, what would be a better position to hold my hands? Further apart. So if I hold my hands further apart on the bar, I can go up a little higher before I do this. Does that make sense? It's not a bad exercise. It's just, yeah, go ahead, Sheila.
So almost like a deadlift position.
Almost, but that would
Okay.
be real. That
But
would be
not as
really
wide.
wide, right?
Okay.
This is where there's a point in my training and my programming where I have to make a decision. Is it worth the time and the effort just to do another exercise? And the answer generally is no. Remember, the paradigm is do as much as you can and stay in the gym for an hour and a half, 2 hours, because I got to use every machine and it's like, no, 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 no. For the most part, I'll be honest with you, training people over many, many years, I probably did no more than 2 or 3 exercises total for deltoids with clients. It's just not necessary. Presses, lateral raises. And then I would do different types of presses. I would use dumbbells. I would use, right, barbells. I love like machines, pressing machines, things like that, where I can manipulate the position. And then I just do different types of lateral raises. I can do 20 different exercises with just those two basic concepts.
Mhm.
Is everybody with me?
Mhm.
I know the beautiful people are in the gym using every piece of equipment they can use, and they're doing, by the way, you can use cables. I use cables with people, the bands. So I guess what I'm saying is that you could do upright rows, you could do them effectively, but there's a trade-off. You just can't go up as high, and you got to have your hands a little wider apart. I'm not going to say not to do them. You could kind of put them in the no-go category if they're being done incorrectly. Does that make sense? Does that help? Um, so guys, remember the deltoids, you don't have to beat them up too bad. Remember, if you're training your pecs, especially on the same day, there's a lot of shoulder involvement in pec work, right? And there's a fair amount of involvement in lat work when you're training your lats. Not a ton, but definitely when you're training the anterior portion of your butt, when you're doing pectoralis major work, you're putting a pretty good amount of stress on, particularly the anterior parts of the deltoid. Again, just keep in mind that when you're training people, last thing, make sure they are feeling it in the target muscle. The deltoid is on the outside of the arm, not on top. You must ask people right from the get-go, do you feel it here or do you feel it here? And this is the magic. That's the answer right there. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions?
It does. That yeah, question I want, and the first thing before, I was definitely uh not aware of what's going on with that shoulder. I thought that part right here was the deltoid.
Right, right.
It was
Yeah.
like as you said it that way. So because when I see the athlete and especially the bodybuilders and also when I see this part, it raises all the way up there. I said, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they have big like deltoids.
Right, right. And
But
that's
it's
not their
actually
deltoid, is it?
it is
Yeah,
it's
it's their
not, it's not.
trapezius. And remember, the
Exactly.
trapezius is a very, very strong muscle. One thing to keep in mind is that it's the trapezius that generally tends to collect and hold on to tension. People get tension headaches. Why? Because the trapezius is going to shorten and contract. And people sitting at computers tend to do what? Can you see this? They tend to do this because your hands are lifted all the time. So, and don't get me wrong, I do shrugs and things like that with clients to train their trapezius. It actually helps people that carry a lot of their stress up in their trapezius and their neck. Now, again, people will say neck. I don't call it the neck. Normally, when I say somebody's neck, I'm talking about that the lateral and anterior, so your sternocleidomastoids, mastoids, cervical flexors, things like that. But the trapezius is posterior.
And usually we refer to it like the cobra.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the cobra.
Right. So when you do a most muscular and the trapezius flare up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, like anything else, you can overtrain them. And the idea is that if you're going to train your deltoids, you actually want to minimize the involvement of your trapezius. So anytime you're doing these exercises, I will always have people lift up their rib cage and drop their shoulders down. Lift up your shoulders, shrug your shoulders, and then drop them down. And that is your position with which you're going to perform these exercises. Guaranteed, as people get fatigued, what's going to happen when people get fatigued? What's going to happen? They're going to start to lift up like
It's not
this.
no
Why?
shoulder.
Because when that muscle gets fatigued, without even thinking, your body automatically kicks in and goes like this. Hey guys, let's help out the deltoids a little bit. And they start to lift up as well. That tension that develops in there, your clients will feel it. You just don't, after a set of shoulder presses or after a set of lateral raises, you don't want your clients sitting there going, man, Doug, that was awesome. Man, that felt great. Woo, man, I really felt that. That is no bueno. That's not good. We don't want them going, man, that was a great shoulder exercise. Because what, Junior?
Right.
That ain't their shoulder, is it? You want them going, man, that burned. Holy cow, man, I really felt that. That's your deltoid. Make sense?
Correct. And the other thing is when I was looking at the picture. So now talk about a little bit about the body position, the way you push it seems that the chest always a little bit forward. You
Lift it up.
lift it up.
Even lean forward slightly, but that's something you
Yeah.
decide when you're working with somebody. Some people need to lean back a little bit to feel it more. Other people need to lean forward and have their arms forward more. Everybody, guys, everybody's different. Not everybody is going to look exactly the same when they do it. You have to make that decision when you're training yourself and when you're training other folks to always remember what is the deciding factor as to the position and the biomechanics. It's whether or not they feel it directly in the muscle. Does that make sense? Okay. Whether it's shoulder presses, dumbbell shoulder presses, machines, lateral raises, even with upright rows, always keep in mind everyone's different, but you do need to feel it in the target muscle. And I'll go back to the other videos that we've done already. Same thing with the pecs and the back and the quads and the hamstrings. Sound good? Yes? Any other questions before I let you guys go? Go ahead, Bina. Unmute. Go ahead and unmute.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So when I'm doing the Smith machine deadlift, okay, so my shoulders and my arms are involved lifting the weight and I have to bend down. So does that also work my anterior, medial, posterior deltoids while I'm doing it? Because I know the trapezius is working to some extent.
Yeah, you got to, if you're talking about deadlifts, are you talking about just regular deadlifts from the ground?
Smith machine deadlift.
If you're doing any type of deadlift, your trapezius is heavily involved.
But what
By the
about
way,
my
your deltoids are heavily involved as well, but they're in an isometric contraction. But the trapezius is heavily involved anytime you lean forward and hold on or lift something.
glutes and hamstrings?
Sure, if you're training your glutes and hamstrings and once you grab a weight, remember, anytime you grab a weight or you grab a bar on the Smith machine, it doesn't matter what you're as soon as you load your upper body to train your legs, for instance, as soon as you load it, your entire shoulder girdle goes into an isometric. All the muscles of your shoulder and shoulder girdle will contract to hold and keep things in place while you do your exercise.
So to some extent, you are working your deltoids while you're doing Smith machine
Sure.
deadlift. Because you're kind of also,
Absolutely.
I'm mostly trying to target my glutes and my hamstrings when I'm doing the Smith machine deadlift. And I think you need to lean more forward for that. And but I think, of course, the trapezius are secondary muscles and deltoid,
Always.
because you're still
Absolutely.
using your arms, right?
Yes.
You're
So
kind
what
of
we're
going
saying is when you're training your legs, of course you're going to get some some kickover effect on the upper body, but we're not training the upper body. Yes, you will feel it. Of
the
course,
deadlift.
they're working in the deadlift. Absolutely. Deadlift, squat, it doesn't matter. Anything you do, holding weights, anything you do to train your legs that involves loading the upper body, whether it be holding a bar like squats, grabbing a barbell to do deadlifts, anything like that will generally put the entire shoulder girdle complex into isometric contractions to stabilize the spinal column and the scapulae, or what's known as the shoulder girdle.
Okay.
Make sense?
Also, is there an exercise that will target the entire anterior, medial, and posterior the best? Like you wanted to
Probably
give it
presses to the front will
shoulder presses
put the most shoulder presses will put the most stress on all three heads simultaneously.
simultaneously. Okay.
Yes, for sure it would be front presses.
Front presses,
right?
okay.
That would most likely involve the largest
When you're
amount of
doing
muscle tissue.
when you're doing lats pull down,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's not a shoulder press, of course. You're pulling it down,
Right.
and that works your maximus dorsi the most, the back
So
muscle.
your
But
latissimus
then,
dorsi, your
yeah,
trapezius, and your posterior deltoid. Now, keep in mind, like I said earlier, the entire shoulder will go into some level of contraction. The entire shoulder will, but it's not significant. The only part that would really be under any significant amount of tension would be the posterior head when I'm doing
for
pull
sure.
downs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sheila, did you raise
Okay.
your hand, Sheila? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, but it's about I want to say it's back in lesson one.
Mm-hmm.
So them the 5 questions that be kicking my tail. I've been thinking I've been knowing these answers, but these 5 questions kicking my tail. But there was one question where it talks about this reciprocal inhibition, what it
Reciprocal inhibition.
involves. So I'm looking at this black and white, and I keep getting it wrong. I put that it's simultaneous. This is a simultaneous muscle contraction of the agnostic, and it's anti-agnostic.
Agonist and
That agonist,
antagonist.
yes, agonist, and that yes.
Right. Well, if you had if both muscles were simultaneously contracting, you wouldn't be able to move.
Okay, so
So
it's not so.
reciprocal inhibition is when the muscle that's in question is going to go into relaxation because the antagonistic muscle is going to relax. So in order to contract my biceps, my agonist, if I'm going to contract my biceps, my antagonistic muscle, the tricep, needs to relax.
Relax. Okay, makes
So
sense.
my agonist, the agonist, right, because of that contraction, is going to essentially relay a message to the Golgi tendon organs of the triceps, which is then going to deactivate the muscle spindle fibers in the tricep. So one
Okay.
muscle tells another to relax so it can work.
Okay, so hold on. So everything you just said, I understood. I don't understand it from this little bullet point here, as it says it occurs from from a stimulation of a contracting muscle, which is
Mm-hmm.
the agonist,
Right.
simultaneously inhibiting
Mm-hmm.
um
Inhibiting
the
or
the
stopping
activity of the opposing muscle.
of the antagonistic muscle.
Okay.
So the bicep is inhibiting the activity of the tricep.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. Now that makes because I saw that and I was thinking I was like, okay, the agonist muscle contracting, which causes to relax. I saw that. Okay, okay. I was like,
You can also watch one of the first videos I did in this
mm-hmm.
series
Okay.
when I talked about that as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm gonna go back to that because I was what my thing is I can't just straight read it and then go that's so I have to do it. I have to do the video and the book together. So I just broke it down 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there,
Okay.
and then go take it that way. But okay, that one was I was misunderstanding what I was reading when I was doing this. So I was like,
Is that
but I
helpful
did get an
though?
80. So I said I'm gonna leave that
Okay.
alone and I'm gonna
All
move
right.
to the next one.
Good. Exactly.
Thank you.
Well, any other questions on this particular topic, guys? No? Good. Well, look, if you have any questions, you can always put it into the comment section below. Appreciate you guys coming on today to talk about this particular topic. Next week, we will be continuing the series and going through the rest of the muscle groups in this workbook. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys later. Thanks. All right, guys. So